Everybody, welcome to another episode of Pyathlon. In today's video, I'll be telling you what a variable is, how you can declare a variable in VBA, and we'll cover all of the data types you can use in VBA. And we'll cover how you can use a message box to display the value of something or a message to the user. So let's dive right in. So we're going to talk about the 5 most common data types you'll need in VBA, and then we'll talk about some other data types that aren't as common and that you may or may not use when you actually program in VBA, but they're still good to know under certain set of circumstances that we'll cover. So let's dive right in. So we'll start by talking about what is a variable. And the variable is just a way to store information. So if you had a program that took in the user's age, then you would store their age in a variable. So how can you actually create a variable in VBA? Well, you have to define it, and then you give it a value. So how do you define a variable in VBA? So in order to do that, you first need this dim keyword, which is short for dimension, which is a keyword in the VB programming language. And remember, VBA is based off of VB. We covered that in our last video. So you need this dim keyword, and then you need the name of your variable. So we're just going to store someone's age here. So we'll say age. And then you need as, and every variable has a data type. So if you're storing text, that would be a string data type. But in this case, we're going to store the age as an integer. You can remember from elementary math, the integer is a number without a decimal. So we'll just store it as an integer. And this is the basic form will be used to declare any kind of variable in VBA. You'll have the dim keyword, the name of your variable, the as keyword, and then the data type. And now we actually need to give age a value. We need to tell VBA what is the age. So you can just do age equals 98. And now we're just telling VBA that age is an integer and we're going to set it equal to 98. So this basic form is what we're going to follow for every data type, with one minor exception when we get to objects, which we'll cover soon. So that's how you define an integer. But what if there's a number that's a decimal? Well, for that, you would want to use what's called the double data type. And double, it is just computer science speak for decimal number. So let's say you want to keep track of how much someone spent. So we'll say amount spent as double, which remember is a number with a decimal. And then, just like how we set age equals to 98, we can set amount spent equal to something, but we can use decimal. So we can set equal to whatever we want, say 37.14. Now, but what if you're not trying to store a number? What if you actually want to store some text? Well, you can do that in VBA also. The data type to store text is called string. So let's say you want to store a name. You can say dim name as string. And then you can set name equals to whatever string you want. When you're dealing with strings, they have to be inside of quotation marks, so VBA knows it's a string. So we'll have our quotation marks, and then whatever name is will go inside of them. And the name of the channel is Pyathlon, in case you didn't know that. So that's how you store text as a variable in Python. Now the next data type is a bit different. It's called a Boolean data type, and it only stores true or false. So why would you want to do this? Well, it'll make more sense once you start getting into if statements and more complex programming structures. But for now, let's say you want a variable that can keep track of is someone old enough to vote. Well, either they are old enough to vote or they're not. So that variable will be true if they're old enough to vote and false otherwise. And that's the kind of case you would want to use a Boolean variable for. If you're wondering why it's called Boolean, it's named after a computer scientist whose last name was Boolean. So let's say we want a variable called old enough to vote. So we'll say dim old enough to vote. And we'll declare it as a Boolean. And then we can set, I'll just copy and paste since that's a long variable name. Then we can set that equal to true or false with the capital T or F. And we don't need quotes. If you were to put this in quotes, it would be a string. And since you declared it as a Boolean, and now you're trying to tell VBA it's a string, you would actually get a type mismatch error and your code wouldn't run. So the last major data type that I want to talk about is objects. If you're not familiar with objects, we have a video on that covering classes and objects on our page, so you can go check that out and then come back to this video. But we're just going to declare a range object. In our last video, we showed you how you can see all of the different types of classes and objects stored on VBA. And I think the most common that will be range. So let's say you have some data and you have your sales data stored from cell A1 to cell B5. Well, that is a range. So you have to declare a range object. So let's say, we'll say dem cells data has range. And earlier I alluded to the fact that when you actually go to give an object a value, it's a little bit different. And really the only difference is you need to use the set keyword before you actually tell VBA what value you're assigning it to. So you have to do set cells data equal to range A1 to B5. Let me make sure my capitalization is right. And you can see here, it's the same form. We have the name of our variable equals and then whatever we're assigning it to. But remember, we have to use this range object. This is how you declare a range in VBA. You have range and you have parentheses and quotes inside of those. And then you have your starting cell of your range, colon, then the ending cell of your range. So those are the 5 most common data types in VBA, but I just want to bring some more data types to your awareness that may or may not actually come up when you're programming in VBA, but they're good to know. And so the next one I want to tell you about are long and long long. Long and long long are both integers, but they're different from the traditional integer data type. Stores 2 bytes of data, long stores 4 bytes of data, and long stores 8 bytes of data. And what that means is long and long can store much larger numbers than the integer data type. The integer data type can store from about negative 33,000 to positive 33,000. That's not an exact number. You can look up the VBA documentation and see the exact numbers. But if you will look at the long data type, it stores 4 bytes and it can store anywhere from negative 2.1 billion to positive 2.1 billion. And long is 8 bytes and it can store a number that I can't even remember off the top of my head, but it's a very massive number. So if you're trying to store a number like 100,000, you wouldn't want to use an integer. You would want to use long for that. Now, there's also long PTR, and you would really only want to use that if you're going to be running your code on a 32-bit system and a 64-bit system. When you use long PTR, VBA will essentially decide whether to treat the variable as a long or a long. And if you want to declare one, you can just simply change this integer to long or long. But we'll just keep it as integer for now. So the next data type I want to inform you about is single. Single is another numeric data type that can store decimals, but it can only store from negative 3 and some change to positive 3. So in most cases, you're just going to want to go ahead and use a double. But if you are storing very small decimals, decimal point numbers, then yes, you can go ahead and use a single data type. And there's also another data type called a variant. And when you have a variant data type, you can declare something as a variant, and then you can set it equal to essentially any other data type. So if I declared age as a variant, and then I decided I wanted to store age as a string, this wouldn't give you an error. This would actually work, because variant is just saying, I'm not sure what data type I want it to be yet, but then when I assign it to something, VBA will infer what data type it should be. I want to talk about in this video is how can you display the value of a variable or display a message to the user. And for that, you will use a message box. So I'm just going to delete all of this code, and I'm going to make a quick subroutine and call it hello world. If you're not familiar with subroutines, for the sake of this video, we're not going to cover that. I'm going to have a whole video dedicated to covering macros and subroutines. But for now, we're just going to declare age as an integer and set age equals 98 again. Now let's say we want the user to see what their age is. Well, we can do that using a message box. So the command to create a message box is msgbox, and then your prompt is actually the message you're going to display to your user. So we're just going to message box the variable age, and we're going to click this run button and run our macro. And you can see we can see our age is 98. Now it doesn't have to be a variable. You can also just display some text as a string. So remember, all strings you need quotations, and let's just say hello world. And then if we were to run this, now we see a message box that says hello world. So thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as well as click the notification bell. Remember, we post videos every week about data visualization using Tableau, cloud computing using Amazon Web Services, programming in Python and VBA. So we have a lot of really good content coming. So please like, comment, and subscribe, as well as check us out on Instagram and Twitter. And please visit pyathlon.com. And thanks for supporting this channel and watching this video all the way through. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.